I'm Caden.
And I'm Seema, his wife.
And we are Love and Lore, taking dark fantasy, light fantasy, and everything in between.
And today, we wanted to talk about cringy moments in the books that we love.
And I mean, it's very easy to criticize books you don't like. You have this reservation sometimes for books that you love and protect because they're so great to you. But there are just some scenes, things that just really pull you away from it. And without going into too much depth, one of the first ones I want to address is The Wheel of Time. I love The Wheel of Time, but it does have plenty of flaws. One of those being Rand having 3 women that are always in love with him, and it's just kind of odd, and the whole time you want him to pick one. Yeah, I'm not going to go too into that to avoid spoilers, but if you've read The Wheel of Time, you know how it is, and Rand isn't the greatest character. I love Matt, I love Perrin, but we always have a little bit of difficulty with Rand. I don't know if you guys have felt the same way reading that series, but it especially comes from the moments where we just see these women with him, and
like all 3 in the same room with him?
Not really just that. It's just like all 3 want him and are in love with him, and it's just, yeah. We'll just leave it at that.
Okay, so you guys know that I love Lunar Chronicles. It's my favorite series, but there is one moment that is really cringy that happens there from time to time. So if you guys know, this is a retelling of princesses or tales in a sci-fi / dystopian setting. And one of the characters is Scarlet, and she's supposed to be a retelling of the Red Riding Hood. And she knows this boy who is supposed to be this genetically modified soldier, half wolf. And from time to time, after they get together, they start calling each other, "You're my alpha," or doing stuff like that I just can't every time. It's so weird, and I feel like it happens a couple of times throughout the series, and I just think it shouldn't have been there.
There's certain times, especially with YA books, that I can be really enjoying them, and then just a bit of cheesiness or something like that completely pulls me out of it. Because I have nothing against YA, but you know, even if you go more towards juvenile literature, I think that's just something that I don't like. And it can be a complete distraction, throwing you out completely with bits of cheesiness or stuff like that. On the other hand, something that has troubled the both of us, we both really enjoy Patrick Rothfuss's Kingkiller Chronicle, despite the fact that book 3 isn't out and who knows if it will ever come out. But we look at the first book, which has many great moments, and this one I believe can be read by younger audiences. It is great, and there's so much to it. And book 2, I wanted to give a 10 out of 10. I loved it, except for Felurian. To be fair, we do not like reading very spicy books in that sense. And when we get love scenes between Kvothe and Felurian, it becomes very uncomfortable, and I think those that even enjoy that type of writing were very uncomfortable with what was going on here, which basically is Kvothe, our main character, meets this fairy woman in the wilderness, and they do little else besides what you would expect we're talking about. And it just becomes really bizarre. It goes on way too long, but the rest of the book is great. It's such a fun adventure, but you just have this that really pulls me out of the book that, like I said, otherwise it would have been a perfect book for me, except for that was so jarring, so unlike the rest of the series, that definitely touches on that wish fulfillment that some people might be talking about when they criticize the Kingkiller Chronicle.
Totally, I agree, because it's not necessarily that like you're reading it and you're cringing as you're reading it. Like, it's written beautifully, and I don't think that like the scenes themselves are cringy, but just the fact that it's there when already people are kind of saying that like, oh, Kvothe is kind of like Mary Sue character, and then you add on top of these the Felurian part, and it just like solidifies it. And just the fact that it's there is cringy, not necessarily the scenes themselves.
And I think that there's kind of like a common thing here that romance can be such a beautiful thing in literature, but if done in, I don't want to say predatory, but an odd way like that, or just a really cheesy way that's super distracting from the story's tone, it can just be a disaster.
Speaking of these disasters, One of my favorites this year has been reading the trilogy of The Prison Healer, and the books are amazing. I thought that romance was great, but then in the middle of the third book, I was reading and I come to this moment. Let me give you some background. So throughout the book, without any spoilers, they're hunting these artifacts, and they're going and they have to kind of earn these artifacts, and when they get to one of them, and this lady owns this artifact, and she's like, okay, but I'll give it to you, but you gotta pay. And so the main character is like, what's the payment? And this is where it starts. She's like, you have to face one of your two greatest fears. And already I'm like, what does this lady get from it? Like, how is this a payment, first of all? But then she goes on to just explain, so what are the two fears and how is she supposed to face them? And one of them is kissing a boy that is mad at her. And I'm reading this and I'm like, oh my gosh, why is this in here? And then the other one is she has to take a drug that she was addicted to for a little bit of time. And she's like afraid to get addicted again. And she chooses to take the drug because kissing him, it'll be too hard. And oh my gosh, I just could not believe that this wasn't there. And like I said, the trilogy itself is so enjoyable, especially the book 2 and 3. I really enjoyed, but that moment just destroyed the whole vibe for me.
This one's a little different because I don't think it was poorly written, but like I said, don't worry, I will steer away from spoilers. But those of you that have read Joe Abercrombie's work, this one I'm going to be talking about is A Little Hatred. I think this is so well done. This is cringe so much that it's something that crawls under your skin, that at the same time it was so painful to read, but it was like how he wrote it was so well done. And in this, there is a certain relationship that flourishes, and you learn that certain characters are perhaps a little closer in relation than they might have thought before. And I remember when I was reading it, like, my jaw just dropped. And it's the same kind of thing with A Game of Thrones. We look at Jaime and Cersei. Oh, just like both of those together, they are such gross characters. And the twins' relationship in A Song of Ice and Fire is very uncomfortable, not to mention all of the Targaryen inbreeding. And if you look at the history of the Targaryen family, as mentioned in Fire and Blood, these people are all just marrying their relatives, which I understand was happening in medieval times, but it is still very uncomfortable to read, especially when we're looking at the two twins from the Lannister family. So that is another thing that is just romance gone wrong.
Writing non-cringy romance is a skill, and I admire anyone who has it. So let us know, are there any other cringy moments in the books that you loved that you just couldn't read and wish they weren't there? Let us know, and thank you for watching our video.